Hello, everybody. My name is Ann Lyman. I am the Artistic Director of the Sine Nomine Renaissance Choir, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our pre-concert lecture for Together Alone with William Byrd. In this lecture, you will hear a little bit about who we are, how this particular project came to be, and then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the music and about its place within the historical context of late 16th century and early 17th century Renaissance England. Sine Nomine is an auditioned volunteer choral ensemble based in Seattle, Washington. We are a member of the community collegia that is attached to Early Music Seattle. It gives early music enthusiasts an opportunity to practice in weekly rehearsals and with performances what it is that we all love so much about this unique and special music. Normally, we have probably about 30 to 40 singers who participate in any given project. We usually have between 2 and 3 projects per year, and we perform in the beautiful sanctuary at Trinity Parish Church on First Hill in Seattle. As we all know, the pandemic of 2020 has presented some unique challenges to choral ensembles all across the world. We were actually in the very final weeks of preparing our winter program, a music of Cipriano d'Aurore, when the statewide mandates forced us to stop meeting in person. Since then, like many other choirs, we started gathering virtually just for informal conversation at first. Then we found ways to engage more musically with our meetings via Zoom. And at some point over the summer, I reached out to some of our dedicated singers and to our managing director, Pam Sillen-Perry, to ask what we might do in place of our normal performing season. I think for this group and for me, not performing wasn't an option. We didn't want to let another moment go by without having the opportunity to really be able to immerse ourselves in beautiful polyphony. And being alone at home seemed like maybe an appropriate way to experience what many composers of the time might have experienced, including William Byrd, who I'll mention in just a moment. So we surveyed our singers to ask what they might be interested in. That survey turned into an opportunity to register for a fall project. And starting in late September, we began to meet like this. Many of you maybe have had either meetings or even musical rehearsals that look a little something like this. But you can see this is just one panel of 3 of our up to 70 singers who would meet every Thursday night over the course of 5 weeks. What would happen is I settled on a program. I worked with our wonderful editor, Pat Rice, who transcribed some new pieces for us to be able to perform. And then over the course of 5 weeks, I would pre-record and upload lessons that would include warm-ups, and they would include the opportunity to sing some rounds. Singers could log into YouTube and view those pre-recorded lessons whenever they wanted to. And then on Thursday nights, we would meet the way you see here. We would meet for conversation. We would do some singing together. I would share some videos. Singers could ask questions. And it was all designed with a final performance in mind. And of course, for most singers like the ones you see here, only a virtual performance was possible. So we chose a few pieces from our large collection to record. Singers volunteered. They only participated in the recordings if they wanted to, and they found themselves recording along with reference tracks all by themselves, both audio and video. And of course, if you haven't seen the concert yet, you'll be able to experience the final product of that, masterfully put together by our recording engineer, Mark David Obenza. So this was our virtual gathering, but we also had a number of singers who met more like this. And this was a very small group. There were only 5 singers total, including me. It was 6, and 6 is actually too many people to meet all at once. So that group was divided into even 2 smaller groups. This particular group you see right here of 4 singers, these are the early birds. This group met on Sunday evenings from 6:30 to 7:30 at Trinity Parish Church. And the reason we were able to meet is because Myself and many of my choral colleagues have made a point of educating ourselves about the safety of singing in live situations during these unique times. There have been a number of scientific studies based on things like mask efficacy and aerosol distribution that have been put together, supported, and eventually peer reviewed on behalf of musical organizations. And those studies so far are telling us that the safest way to sing in person is to do so while everybody is completely masked, no more than 5 people together indoors, and with appropriate amount of distance, and then not being able to sing in a single room for any longer than 30 minutes at a time. So this particular group met for 30 minutes in one room at the church, and then we would move to a different room in the church to meet for 30 more minutes, always with a lot of space and a well-ventilated space. We did quite a lot of singing with heavy coats and scarves as the weather got cold. But these singers and the other singers who performed live, our late birds, learned how to negotiate singing with masks, singing far apart, where you can't hear each other quite as well. And over the course of 5 weeks, really made great strides from that first rehearsal where I think we were all a little nervous to by the end remembering what it is that we enjoy about live music making. So let's talk just a little bit about the music itself. So this is our namesake for our program, William Byrd, one of the greatest composers of the Renaissance era. He was very well regarded in his life, and in England, this is quite a big deal. If you have the Queen's favor, it really does quite a lot to further your career. And William Byrd worked for Queen Elizabeth's household. He was a member of the Chapel Royal. He, along with Thomas Tallis, owned a printing monopoly that allowed their music to be widely printed and distributed throughout England. So by the time he died, he was very well known as a composer. It's not very common in the Renaissance era. Here's an example of what the music that he wrote would have looked like. This is the Mass for 4 voices. What you're looking at right here is the soprano part. And what you can see is just the single part on the page. The first 2 lines up here is the first Kyrie, the Christe, and then the Kyrie. And then it moves on to the Gloria. This music would have been compiled in what are called part books, where each singer is only looking at their own part. And if you know or have sung in a choral ensemble before, you know that for the most part as singers, we get to see everybody's part because it's important for sopranos to perhaps know what tenors sang in the bar before. This is a very different kind of skill. It is not one that we practiced, but I always think it's important to educate our audience about the kind of music that we sing, because this is how it was conceived. It is conceived as one part by itself, and as you can see, no bar lines, and with a notation that's quite a bit different from what we're used to. This is what a part book would actually look like. It's kind of hard to tell the scale, but it's very small. It's about half the length of a normal book that might be on our own shelves, and it's just small enough for a single singer to be able to see. Where would this music have been performed? Well, this is the interesting thing about this program. Much of what William Byrd wrote during his life was for public worship by Queen Elizabeth and her household. What you see right here is the Chapel Royal in Hampton Court. This is well past the Renaissance era. The Chapel Royal's location at Whitehall burned to the ground in the late 1600s, and so we don't have that actual space to be able to see anymore. But you can see it's an illustrious large room. We are looking down the choir in this particular picture. It's a very large room. Behind would be an even bigger space where people would gather to attend worship. A lot of this space was meant for public viewing, and a lot of the music that William Byrd wrote for the Protestant reign of Queen Elizabeth was for public consumption. So it's not just an artistic motivation for William Byrd or even a spiritual one. It's very much a PR kind of thing. But a lot of William Byrd's music that he wrote for Catholics to worship together in private would have been written more for a space like this. This is a recreation of a small chapel space in a wealthy home. It's much smaller. As you can see, there's not quite so much adornment. This is possibly in a residential room, like a bedroom or some kind of a dressing room even. And these very small spaces would have been designed for a family to worship together and also for friends to come over and worship together. And we know that William Byrd did a lot of this worship in secret because, of course, it was illegal to worship as a Catholic during Elizabeth's reign and later during James's reign as well. But he had reputation and he had connections, and for the most part, the politicians in London would just turn a blind eye. But these kinds of personal worship spaces would need to be ones that could be well hidden or even torn down and removed at a moment's notice if needed. What I like about this program for our purposes is to envision a space like this, because of course for us as singers, we are not rehearsing in our big sanctuaries. We are not performing with the audience in front of us. We are doing everything from the privacy of our own home or whatever space we happen to be in that's comfortable to us. And when we're done being together, we turn off the computer and we go immediately back into our normal lives without the opportunity to transition. So I wanted to introduce a program to our project participants that might help align them with a moment in history in which a great artist was finding himself in possibly a similar situation. It brings us a little bit closer to the music, and it brings us a little bit closer to the beauty, and perhaps at the end of the project, a little bit more understanding about why we find the music so beautiful. If you haven't had a chance to see the concert yet, you'll find a link posted to this video that will take you to the concert. There's also a link below where you can view the program for the concert. I encourage you to check in with it. You'll not only hear the music, but you'll also get to hear from some singers themselves as they provide some testimonials about their experience with this project. And of course, please subscribe to our channel, Sine Nomine, so that you can find out about future programs.